If you're looking for an affordable SUV, well, they don't come any cheaper than the MG ZS. This car isn't only thousands of pounds cheaper to buy than the slightly smaller Peugeot 2008 or the slightly larger Nissan Qashqai. Like for like, this is actually slightly cheaper than Dacia Duster. Is that because it's a terrible car, or is it a rare bargain in a market of overpriced modern SUVs? Well, that's what we'll be finding out in this video, but before we start, hit subscribe below, and to save more than £1,500 on the price of a new MG ZS to make it even more tempting, just head to whatcar.com. The MG ZS has been on sale in the UK since 2017, and it was the car that really catapulted the modern version of the MG brand, owned by Chinese company SAIC, into the mainstream. MG's first SUV, the GS, came a couple of years earlier, but it wasn't very good and didn't sell very well. The ZS sells in surprisingly big numbers. So let's talk about the money side of things, because if that isn't the number one reason you're thinking about buying a ZS, then it's certainly going to be up there. Prices start at £17,820. For context, the cheapest 2008, that's more than £24,000, and the cheapest Qashqai costs more than 27k. So compared with popular alternatives like that, this looks like an absolute bargain. In fact, it's cheaper than some regular small cars like the Skoda Fabia and the Toyota Yaris as well. There is, though, one SUV that, if we're talking about brochure prices, is even cheaper, and that's the Dacia Duster. However, if you look at prices you should actually be paying, and you can check out the deals section of our website for more information about that, this is slightly cheaper. And there's more, because if you go for the cheapest version of the Duster, you don't even get alloy wheels, your rear passengers will have to wind their own windows up and down, and the infotainment system is basically a radio from the early 2000s. Go for the cheapest Excite version of the ZS, and you'll get electric windows all round, alloy wheels, automatic LED headlights, and a proper touchscreen infotainment system that we'll talk you through later on. We wouldn't bother spending any more, but if you want to, an extra £2,500 gets you exclusive trim, which has leather look seats heated in the front, a 360-degree parking camera, a digital driver's display, and some extra safety aids, including blind spot monitoring. And if you're thinking, okay, it might be cheap, it might be well equipped, but I bet it's horrible inside, well, it isn't. It's actually reasonably nice in here. So this main part of the dashboard is made from dense, squidgy material, the sort of stuff you'll find in a Nissan Qashqai. And there's actually some fake stitching up here as well. That's a trick used in far more expensive cars than this, like certain Kia models. So overall, it's much more upmarket in here than it is in the Dacia Duster or even a Skoda Fabia. MG has borrowed several design cues from Audi in here. So there are these turbine-style air vents and this door lock and unlock mechanism as well. That is very similar to what you'll see in previous generation Audis. But if you're going to copy anyone, previous generation Audi models were the absolute benchmark for interior quality, so that is not a bad place to start at all. It all feels solid in here as well. There are no creaks or rattles when you're driving along, and this model has faux leather with this sort of carbon fibre pattern on the seats as well. Now, if this were a £50,000 BMW, I'd be saying that's a little bit tacky and these seats don't really feel like leather at all, but it isn't a £50,000 BMW, it is a £21,000 car in this range-topping exclusive form. And when you consider that, it is pretty tough to beat. There are some aspects of the interior that aren't so great though. So one of those is this infotainment system. Now on the plus side, you do get a touchscreen with all versions of the ZS, as I said earlier, and you don't with an entry-level Dacia Duster, but it isn't a particularly great one. So for one thing, the screen is quite low down on the dashboard, so you have to cast your eyes down there rather than looking at the road ahead. The screen resolution isn't brilliant either, and it can take an age sometimes when you press an icon for anything to actually happen. On the plus side though, you do get Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, so really you can bypass MG's native system, which is a bit fiddly, some quite small icons on it. And then you've got the same basic infotainment system than you'd find on any other new car. A much bigger problem is the driving position though. So you are a little bit higher up than you are in a regular hatchback, similar level to a Dacia Duster, not quite as high as a Nissan Qashqai. The problem is that I am far too close to the pedals than I really want to be, and that's because the steering wheel, it moves up and down, but it doesn't move in and out. And I would much rather sit further back, further away from the pedals, and pull the steering wheel towards me, but I can't do that. I'd also much prefer it if the steering wheel sprouted out of the dashboard a bit higher up, because as it is, it's quite low down, it's sort of angled up towards my face. So again, not particularly comfortable. And then we come to the seats. So if you go for range topping exclusive trim, then you do get electric adjustment to move the seat forward, backwards, up and down, and you can adjust the backrest. But there is no adjustable lumbar support, and there isn't much lower back support really at all. So on longer journeys, this is not particularly great. This isn't the kind of car you're going to be wanting to tour the country in. Now, as I've already said, the ZS is a little bit smaller than a Nissan Qashqai. It's about 10 centimeters shorter, but as you can see, it's pretty roomy in the back. I'm just over 6 feet tall. This seat in front is set up for my driving position, and look, got plenty of knee room there, and I've got plenty of headroom as well. This car is an exclusive model, so it gets this panoramic roof, and quite often that will lower the height of the ceiling to the point that I would have to cower. But here, I can sit back in my seat, use the headrest, and my head isn't touching the ceiling. So that is pretty good, and it's certainly more spacious in the back here than it is in a Duster. The rear seats don't do anything clever, they don't slide or recline, but then again, there aren't many cars in this class, particularly at the cheaper end of the scale, that offer that flexibility either. You do get 2 Isofix mounts on the outer rear seats, and you can carry 5 people, 5 adults in here in the back relatively easily, although whoever sits in the middle does have this quite annoying hump to straddle. Now, on paper, the ZS has a fractionally bigger boot than the Dacia Duster, although because it's not a particularly square shape, as you can see, it's wide right at the back of the car here, but narrows a lot towards the rear seats. We only managed to fit 6 carry-on suitcases under the parcel shelf. That's not bad, it's the same as a Skoda Fabia, but the Duster, with its squarer boot, that managed to take 7 cases. On the plus side though, if you need to carry more, you can fold down the rear seat backs. They split 60-40, and all versions of the ZS get this height adjustable boot floor as standard. One annoying thing though is that when you've finished loading or unloading, particularly if you're slightly taller than average, then it's very easy to bump your head on this boot lid because it doesn't open very high. So it's cheap, it's practical, it's even fairly nice inside. What's the catch? Well, we've come to that bit, and the biggest problem with the ZS is undoubtedly the way it drives. It's not very good. This particular car I'm driving is the slightly more expensive 1 litre, and the engine itself is okay. It's fairly quiet, it pulls well enough from low revs, and outright acceleration is acceptable. It can do 0 to 60 in around about 10.5 seconds. The transmission though is frankly terrible. So you get a 6-speed manual gearbox with this engine, and it's notchy. In fact, sometimes when you come to a stop, it's difficult to engage first gear. You have to go into second and then back into first. It's really not very nice at all. And you also find yourself slipping the clutch to keep things smooth when you're driving at low speeds, because if you don't do that and you just gently ease on and off the accelerator pedal, then it can become quite jerky and the car sort of kangaroos down the road. The cheaper 1.5 has a 5-speed gearbox and a slightly nicer action, but it doesn't make the ZS really any smoother to drive at low speeds. Now, the 1.5 litre doesn't have a turbocharger, so it needs revving harder, and of course that means more noise. But it is quite a bit cheaper, official fuel economy is exactly the same, and if you do rev the engine, then on paper at least, it's slightly quicker. Whichever engine you go for though, you do have to put up with quite an unsettled ride. The suspension doesn't feel very sophisticated at all, you're jostled around in your seat, and you can also feel vibrations from the surface of the road filtering up through the steering wheel. This is not a relaxing car to drive at all. And when you're doing more than about 40 miles an hour, there's lots of road noise as well. So this really isn't the kind of car you want to be doing lots of miles in. So this is one of the worst cars in the class, if not the worst, for ride comfort. The Duster isn't the most amazingly comfortable or quietest car either, but it is better than this on both counts. It's not all bad news though. The ZS is a bit more agile than the Duster. On a country road like this, it feels relatively composed. There isn't as much body lean as you'd see in the Duster. Okay, it isn't any fun really at all, but the steering is relatively precise. It's just a shame it's a little bit unnecessarily heavy for a small SUV like this. Anyway, here are 5 more things you'll want to know about the MG ZS if you're thinking about buying one. Euro NCAP awarded the ZS just 3 stars out of 5 for safety, and that was way back in 2017 when the tests were a lot less rigorous than they are today. Curiously, the electric version, the ZS EV, was tested back in 2019 and scored 5 stars, but that doesn't apply to this petrol model. The ZS comes with a free poltergeist, or at least this one does, because if you've been listening to Apple CarPlay and then you park car up, lock it, come back to it again, when you switch it on, someone or something has turned the radio up full blast. Scary. Although this 1 litre engine is better than the 1.5, it isn't worth the minimum £2,500 extra you'll need to spend to get it. That's because you can't have the 1 litre with entry-level Excite trim unless you also pay for an automatic gearbox. The ZS comes with a 7-year 80,000 mile warranty as standard, which is a lot better than the 3-year 60,000 mile one you get with a Duster. The only colour you don't have to pay extra for is white, but there are 5 others to choose from, including this Monument Silver, which costs £545. So the MG ZS is not class leading when it comes to ride comfort, driving position, tech, or anything really, apart from price, and that's pretty important. If this is your budget, we would recommend having a look at a Skoda Fabia, because that car is a lot more comfortable, it's almost as practical, and it doesn't cost that much more money. But if you want the SUV look, so you need a slightly raised driving position, then really it's between this and a Dacia Duster. The Duster is better to drive, there's no doubt about that, but this has a nicer interior, it's better equipped, and when you factor in discounts, it's a bit cheaper as well. We hope you've enjoyed this video. If you want to read our detailed written review of the MG ZS, click there. And to watch our video review of its main rival, the Dacia Duster, click there.